The new junior hockey to NCAA rules are official. What does that mean for NHL prospect development? Plus, a likely suspension on the way, a top rookie gets scratched, and the Hockey Hall of Fame is celebrating its new class. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can find us over on YouTube, on the SiriusXM app, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. How you doing, Gil?
I am doing well. It's, a good weekend coming up. We should have a lot of really good hockey and season. I like this part of the season. I do.
Yeah, it's like things have settled in.
Yep.
And like the storylines are kind of gelling and, there's actually teams are starting to panic now and teams are starting to like put their foot on the gas a little bit more now. So I love it. I think one of the more interesting storylines, and I say this just to me because I cover the Flyers, but Matvei Michkov was scratched by John Tortorella last night, and it always causes a little bit of controversy when John Tortorella does anything, but I think it's a really interesting thing because this is a pattern for John Tortorella. And when he is trying to develop young players, if he feels like they're struggling with something, he'll sit them and make them watch from the press box as a learning experience. And that's part of his process. And, if you like it or you don't like it as part of his process, that's all well and good. But I think with Matvei Michkov, it's causing a little bit more ruffled feathers just because he is one of the top rookies in the league, and he was rookie of the month for October. And it just seems like, even though Michkov had kind of slowed down and he hadn't scored in a while, still a little touchy to do that, right?
It is. And, to me, the question is, okay, John Tortorella, he's going to get attention. That's Torts. He's earned sort of that reputation over the years. But the question is, is it effective at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to get his point across? And is there a better way to get that point across than sitting him? And to me, I think it really depends on the temperament of the player and where they are at the moment. You cover the Flyers. Do you think this is the best way for Torts to handle Michkov?
I don't necessarily think it is. I think that given the factors that he's 19 and he's not like an older rookie. He's also, just moved over to North America and he's still learning English. So it's like, I feel like he would benefit from being on the bench and kind of listening to what's happening, even if he has reduced minutes, because that's what's happened in the previous few games is that his minutes were down a little bit. So talk to him on the bench, have a coach talk to him on the bench while plays are happening if he's not out there for that shift and say, this is what we're talking about here.
Right.
And that it's easier to do that, as it's happening. And then you still get to use them on the power play when you want to. So I think like that would be the better approach for him in particular, but I don't think it's impossible that kind of strategy would work for somebody. I just don't know that it's the right option for him. In other news from last night's action, obviously, the big hit on Brock Boeser by Tanner Jeannot, that was not great.
No, you look at the replay, it is such a, clearly it's shoulder to jaw, it looks like, and it does. I mean, I'm not going to say that this was a deliberate intent to injure, but it certainly was not a clean hit, and I would not at all be surprised if there's a suspension coming, even though Tanner Jeannot has never been suspended yet during his NHL career.
Yeah, it's just like a clear-cut illegal check to the head in the NHL rulebook and like textbook. So I
Yeah.
don't think they have any choice but to suspend him. And I would say it's probably a 3-game suspension.
I would say that's right. If he had previous suspensions, maybe you go 5. But he's been fined once for kneeing 2 years ago. But there's just no way. I mean, you could take this highlight of this hit and make it like this is what we don't want you to do example. It's just that it's that obvious.
Yeah, and I just really think it's the right thing to do to suspend him.
I
So
agree. I
there's
agree.
that. Uh, Alexander Ovechkin scored again. So there's that. I honestly was very much doubtful that he was going to get the record this season when it started, just based on how last year went. But now 34 away, very
Yeah,
doable. I think
it,
it's doable.
it is possible. I mean, he has to stay healthy, obviously,
Hmm.
and will he be able to sustain this level of production? The amazing thing is he definitely does have a chance. And
Yeah,
one thing I have learned over the last 2 decades: never doubt Alexander Ovechkin.
I know. It's like it's very frustrating as somebody who has supported teams that are not the Washington Capitals and in
Right.
that division for these many years. But he's definitely a player that you just have to be like, yeah, he is that guy. And, he deserves these accolades because he has put in the time and he is that good. So can't really complain about it in the grand scheme of things.
No, when you have an all-time great player like that, you just sit back and watch and appreciate what it is he brings to the game. Even if you don't like the Capitals, like, other Metropolitan Division fans, they may not, he may frustrate them over and over and over again, but you just have to realize the rarity of the talent that you're watching.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the other big news in hockey land was the making official of the NCAA rule to allow CHL players to be eligible for NCAA Division One hockey starting next season. And this is a pretty seismic shift in how prospects develop and what players can do to put themselves in the best positions for draft eligibility and post draft, and where they want to continue their game. And with the kind of rise of NCAA hockey as a more premier training ground for NHL players versus juniors, that playing field is starting to level. This could be absolutely huge, right?
Yeah, it really can be. This can change the way that players choose to develop their game and their education, and just the way that NHL teams approach players coming out of college, players coming out of juniors. I really think this is, we will not know the full extent of the impact of this for many years, but I think the impact is going to be huge.
Yeah, and you look at in the past why they weren't allowed to, and it's because technically CHL players get income
Right.
for playing, and so they couldn't have NCAA eligibility. But they've kind of parsed the line here and said, okay, if you're just getting your stipend and your room and board and whatever your basic expenses covered, that doesn't count as getting a salary. If you make more than that, you're getting paid additional, which I assume is going to involve like NIL income
Right.
kind of stuff. If you get anything above that, then you're not eligible to move to NCAA. So it's going to change like how the younger junior players, because they're drafted at 16, right, for the junior leagues, and so they're good maybe gonna wanna play a year or 2 in the junior leagues and then transfer to college when they're 18, like, right after they're drafted, in order to play around bigger, stronger, faster guys so that they're more ready to join the NHL when they've signed their ELC and can move forward.
Yeah, and then, there's also the difference in schedules. You play fewer games in college than you do in
Mhm.
juniors. The games are more spaced out. They're usually only on weekends. So it's a different lifestyle. It's a different approach. And I think, you have the advantage of playing against older opponents. So yeah, I think this is going to change the way that younger players are developed into professional hockey going forward.
Right, and I think the interesting part of it will be players after they're drafted, if they choose to sign those ELCs earlier or not, because because you lose your NCAA eligibility once you do that, right?
Right.
So, are they gonna whether they're in junior, they can still have sign that ELC. They can just go back to junior and, push those contracts a year, but they can't do that in college hockey. So there's gonna be a little give and take there, and we'll see which kind of players choose what, and it definitely will be fascinating.
It will be. And then will the owners try to change that formulation in the next CBA, which is set to expire in less than 2 years?
Yep, absolutely. Well, that's what's happening in the beginning of people's hockey careers. Up next, we're going to talk about the very tail end of hockey careers in the induction ceremony coming up this weekend, or Monday to be specific, for the new Hockey Hall of Fame class. We'll do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to doctor's offices to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's health care by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visit. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Some of the best concerts of the year take place in the fall, and it's my favorite time to head to a show. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only those incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about last minute flash deals and super deals so you know you're getting the best bang for your buck. Best of all, they have all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate the feature, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, like I said, Monday at 7:30 p.m. is the Hockey Hall of Fame induction ceremony for this year's class. Hockey Hall of Fame always does a great job with a whole weekend of activities around it, with like fan fests and a Hall of Fame game and lots of fun stuff. So I think a lot should be happening. I think it's like the same weekend that Taylor Swift is in Toronto, if I'm so it's kind of a crazy weekend, if I recall correctly. But at any rate, for the player category, just to kind of remind us of who's going in this year. We have Pavel Datsyuk, Jeremy Roenick, and Shea Weber from the men's side. And on the women's side, we had Krissy Wendell and Natalie Darwitz. And of course, I am thrilled there are finally two women going in the same year because they have not done that and it's been long overdue. But starting with the NHL players, Pavel Datsyuk, absolute no-brainer. Just such a pioneer, I think. One of the earlier Russian superstars in the NHL. 14 seasons, 314 goals, 604 assists, and 953 games. And he was just like such a class player. There's a reason why he won those Lady Bings all the time. And of course, Stanley Cup winner multiple times. Like, I think like this is one of my favorite Hall of Fame guys ever.
Such a great all-around player. And you think about the combination of winning 4 Lady Bing trophies and 3 Selke trophies. So here's a guy who was productive offensively and then played defense without being dirty and taking penalties. I mean, that's just an incredible and rare combination. Never had in his entire NHL career more than 35 penalty minutes in a season.
Oh my God.
I mean, 228 penalty minutes in 953 games. For some guys, that's a season. It's incredible that he was able to do that and be productive offensively and be a part of some great Red Wings teams. Yeah, I agree. No brainer here for Datsyuk.
Yeah, and one of the rare players from a team I did not support that I bought a jersey for just because I loved his game so much. Jeremy Roenick had a really interesting path to the NHL. Massachusetts kid, of course, like big hockey hotbed there, but he played in the Q for his junior career before the NHL, and that's a little bit more rare for an American to kind of go that route. But huge impact on American hockey, played in the Olympics, won the silver medal in 2002, and also really an interesting NHL career, playing for a number of teams over the course of his career, playing, for the Blackhawks and the Yotes and the Flyers. And so I think he just had like one of those careers that was, I think, quietly great because he was always there in your consciousness, but never like in this elite conversation, but he was.
Yeah, he was like consistently really, really good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he had a couple of 50-goal seasons, so you can't take that away from him. 3 straight 100-point seasons. And the other thing about Jeremy Roenick, and you can, agree or disagree that this should be part of the equation, but his personality helps sell the game. And I think
Yeah.
that has to be
Love him or hate him.
love him or hate him. He helps sell the game, and I think that does count for something. So, and toward the end of his career, when he was slowing down on the ice, he still provided some leadership. 500 plus goals, 1,200 points in more than 1,300 games. To me, I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He had to wait a little while. I understand that. I think that was also kind of
The right way.
right, that he
Yeah.
wouldn't be first ballot, but a
Yeah.
great player, and I think he does belong.
Yeah. The unusual entry into the Hockey Hall of Fame, in my opinion, is Shea Weber, only because he's still technically under contract and I think getting paid by Utah this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was last year, on the roster in some way of the Arizona Coyotes, even though he spent the whole year, I believe, on LTIR. But here's a guy who, especially during his time in Nashville, was just an elite defenseman and a guy who, 4-time All-Star, won the Messier Award for leadership in 2016. And, really he had 3 20-goal seasons, took his game in a two-way kind of a way to a different level. I really appreciate what he brought to the table over the course of his career.
Yeah, and I think like his international play also should not be denied. Being on Team Canada, won a couple of gold medals, won World Juniors, won a World Championship. So I think, he had a very well-rounded career. And
Absolutely.
so you look at the bigger picture of the Hockey Hall of Fame, that's not just about your NHL career. I think that adds to like the reasoning why he absolutely deserves to be there. um, Krissy Wendell and Natalie Darwitz getting named to it. Both Minnesota players, both Golden Gophers, and international players for Team USA. Absolutely love to see that. In the builders category, we have Colin Campbell and David Poile.
Yeah, I think David Poile, I mean, he's a legacy in the sense that, his dad also a longtime executive. And, David Poile really did so much for hockey over the course of his career. And Nashville Predators, I mean, having Shea Weber and David Poile going in for Nashville fans is huge.
Yeah, I love that together. So they'll be celebrating all of those people on Monday and all throughout the weekend. Speaking of the weekend, there's a full slate of games to talk about taking place, and we are going to do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And hockey fans, you could also use your knowledge of the game of hockey on FanDuel. Check out all the latest odds. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
We talked about Alexander Ovechkin earlier in the show today, and I think that is kind of the premier game on the schedule tonight. The Washington Capitals hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins, Gil.
Sid and Ovi, I mean, those two guys will
Tale
be
as old as time.
exactly for the last 2 decades. These guys have been having their teams have been going head to head. They've been going head to head. The good thing about this, from a hockey fan's perspective, these two players bring out the best in each other. The rivalry brings out the best in them. And you got to love a rivalry game like this. It's in Washington. The Capitals have been playing really, really well, while the Penguins have been struggling. So let's see if Sid and Jeannot can help lift the Penguins out of their doldrums right now.
Yeah, yeah. Also intriguing is Detroit heading into Toronto. I think that Detroit has won their last couple of games. They've been struggling, but they've won their last couple. Toronto did win their last, but they've been kind of even at 500 ball their last 10. And Detroit is trying to turn things around right now. And so this is kind of an important game for them.
Yeah, I think it's very important for Detroit. Right now, Toronto has played a couple of extra games. A win here for Detroit can really move them up a little bit in the Atlantic Division standings. And I think a road win in Toronto would also give them a boost of confidence.
Yeah, I think so too. The Wild are in Anaheim and Vegas is in Seattle for the other two games tonight. Saturday, though, huge schedule of games. And I think the Dallas Stars at Winnipeg Jets in the afternoon is the one I'm going to pay attention to the most, right?
Oh, that's a huge game. And, I feel for the Dallas Stars. They're off to
Mhm.
a great start at 8-4, but they're being totally overshadowed by Winnipeg. And I mean, 13-1, just an incredible start for the Jets. Connor Hellebuck playing outstanding hockey, but it's not just him. This team is clicking on all cylinders. And you almost hope, if you're a Jets fan, that they're not peaking too soon this season.
Yeah, I think on the Dallas side, they are generally playing well, but they're losing to the few teams that are just above them in
Yep.
skill and results, right? They lost those 2 games to Florida in the Global Series, and now they have to face Winnipeg, who are 13-1. So I think like beating those teams who are just slightly better than them is the big thing for Dallas right now, in my
Big test.
opinion. Yeah, absolutely. Montreal at Toronto on Saturday. Of course, Toronto will be on the second half of a back-to-back, but you can never go wrong with a Habs Leafs game.
Yeah, always classic. The original 6 Canadian versus Canadian matchup. And the Habs really could use a win here.
They absolutely could. Devils will be visiting your New York Islanders, Gil.
Islanders have found a way over their last 2 games to pull out wins despite missing 2/3 of their top line and all 3 of their left shot defensemen. So they've sort of dug deep. The Devils 9-5-2. They've been playing some pretty good hockey as of late. Winners of 4 of their last 5. This should be a really good game.
Yeah, and I think this Utah-Nashville game on Saturday is just like Nashville is in like a pit of despair right now, right? They just like can't seem to buy in. And Utah has been kind of a little uneven, right? Off to a good start, but like struggling against the better teams. And this could be a really good opportunity for them to get, a second win in a row, but then also kind of build some confidence against a struggling team, right?
Yeah, and Barry Trotz seems to be hinting around a little bit now that if the Predators don't turn it around, he may look to retool a little bit. And
Mm.
just I think more than anything at this point, it's trying to send a message to his team to start playing a little better. But interesting development to watch down in Nashville.
Right. And the Blue Jackets are in LA, but I think, the late game that people are going to have their eyes on is Edmonton at Vancouver, right?
Yeah, I mean Vancouver 7-2-3. The Oilers starting to hopefully find their game after another slow
Well,
start.
hopefully to who, Gil?
Yeah, well, hopefully to Oilers fans, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, but this is a great matchup between these 2 Western Conference teams, and in Vancouver, it's not going to be easy. But the Oilers have a lot of talent. Let's see if they can get it done on the road.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that game. Sunday is a lighter schedule, as is generally the case in the fall, but I think that you know of the 3 games, I like this Minnesota Wild at Chicago Blackhawks game the most, just because the Minnesota Wild are one of the few teams that aren't playing Saturday, and so they'll have had that day off in between, and they're just on such a roll. And this is a nice rivalry between these 2 teams, and, it's always tough going into, the United Center. Blackhawks, I know, are struggling a little bit, but I think this is the kinda game that they would step it up a little bit for.
Yeah, this is the kind of game you throw out the records and you just, these 2 teams don't like each other and they are going to go head to head, and that makes for great hockey. So I'm looking forward to that game. And the thing about the Blackhawks, yeah, they're really inconsistent right now, but there's a lot of young talent on that
Mhm.
roster. So even though they may not be winning, they can be really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really fun action of weekend of hockey for y'all to watch. And we'll be back next Friday to recap the week that was and look ahead to the next weekend of action. Gil, you'll be back on Monday talking to hosts from around the Locked On NHL network about what's going on with their teams. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.